to evolve. It's very exciting. So I'm here today as your moderator for today's Community of Practice event. I've been on campus for 5 years, and I was at UCOP for 8 years, and so I have a great love for this institution. The Social Learning Community of Practice, this networking session, I think all of us, if we want to learn from one another, can benefit from actually having to meet other people. Otherwise, how do we learn from one another, right? And sometimes that initial, what feels almost like a cold call, you know, where you're actually having to go up and greet someone or figure out how to chat with them, can be one of the most difficult parts about getting to know new people, because this feels awkward, it feels forced, something doesn't feel right about it. Well, we have someone here today who does it exceptionally well, James Dudek, and we're going to have a lot to learn from him today. And the way that we're going to do this is Inette Dishler is going to be interviewing him. So we're going to have an interview style sort of experience, during which time they will you'll be watching them. She'll be interviewing him as if you were watching a television show kind of thing. And at some point they might ask something of the group, at which case then please all respond eagerly. That will be very good, okay? And that's how we're going to handle it. And then once we're done, the idea is we're going to learn such amazing tools and tips in here that what we're going to do is go forth and practice them by going to Eureka. How many of you ever been to Eureka? It's on Center Street, so that's where we're headed right after this. And when we go to Eureka, we're all going to practice and hang out and feel comfortable networking with one another, because we'll have gotten all these tools and tips and tricks. How does it sound? All right, that's our plan. All right, so let me tell you about our two honored guests up here. We have James Dudek, who is the Yoda of networking at UC Berkeley. Except he is slightly taller and has a lot more hair than Yoda. Okay. Now I am myself.
Who wrote this?
I'm just saying.
Not I am.
I don't look at him. Now, Inette and I don't think either one of us has ever been to an event, for like a networking type event that James hasn't already been there, and is probably one of the first people there, so we're going to learn about that. That's actually something that he'll be alluding to, okay? He has truly mastered the art of personal connections, how to connect people that he knows with other people for beneficial collaborations. He explores opportunity. He uses networking to expand his knowledge. There's a lot. I always look at him as somebody that I can continually grow and learn from, and how to do this really well, okay? Now, Inette actually has known James forever, since 2002. They served on the Chancellor's Staff Advisory Committee together, and ever since then, James was the chair, and he always understood the value of seeing the organization, the institution as a whole, not as an like individual siloed organization. Now, he started BPOG in 2005, which is another community of practice. How many of you are familiar with BPOG? It's a Business Process Analysis Working Group. And the reason he started this was he actually had a genius idea. He got moved into a position that required him to be able to do some process analysis. And he didn't really know much about it. And he thought, there's got to be other people on campus that either do this in their jobs, or maybe also don't know much about it and want to learn about it. Maybe if I bring these people together, we can all learn together. And so that sort of was the dawn of the community of practice era, and it spawned so many other groups since then, including this one, our own social learning community of practice. Okay, I would say that, what are you currently? The director of organizational strategy for Student Affairs IT. Okay, and James honestly looks and proactively tries to either share something with his network every day or learn from his network every day. So we're going to have a lot to explore with him. Now, his interviewer is Inette Dishler. Inette has been on campus for 14 years. She has been a learning professional for 26 of her years on this planet, okay? She is very passionate about staff learning and growth. She ran the Leadership Development Program, LDP, for years and years and years, and actually we're quite excited to let you all know that she is actually working on a new program for emerging leaders as we speak, and she's also currently creating a new learning portal for campus, which is going to help all of us in our own learning. She has a very strong and diverse network, both on campus and off. I've never walked anywhere with her and not had, everywhere we go, 2 or 3 people know her and her hugging, and so she definitely knows many, many, many people. And she loves, I think part of it is that she loves to offer her own skills and her own knowledge and ideas to people in her network, so it's not just about getting from her network, she's constantly giving to her network, and that's a beautiful thing. So she co-established this community of practice, both of us together. That's the co. And that's the idea, was to support social learning on campus, and networking is just one way of doing that. So please join me in welcoming our 2 esteemed guests, James Dudek and Inette Dishler.
Thanks, Kathy, and James, it's so great to be here with you today. When Kathy and I came up with the idea for this topic for one of our networking, our community practice sessions, we both immediately thought of James as the obvious go-to guy to be our resident expert for it. So we started talking about kind of what is the purpose of networking in terms specifically of building a learning community, a learning network. And so all these signs that you see around the room are some of the brainstorming that we did, and even beginning to conceptualize, some of the different concepts that capture what we're trying to convey about networking. And we'll go into all the depth about that in my questions to James. So my first question is, in your opinion, what is the purpose of networking?
Well, all this is going to be really personal, because I think it is really personal, like how you build a network, the people you choose to spend your time with. And I've always hated the term networking, probably for the same reason a lot of people here maybe distrust or maybe even despise the term networking. Because coming from an IT background, it sounds very physical. It sounds very like infrastructure and connecting things and connecting railroads and all that sort of. It seems very dispersonal. And for me, the whole purpose behind networking is what I call it connecting. It's by making authentic connections to actual other human beings. And the point of that is to be part of a learning organization. And so the more connections that I can make, and again, the networking piece, when people talk about networking, I always think of someone who's, he or she is very, very aggressive, wants to meet as many people as possible, wants to get as many business cards as possible, to what end? To advance their career, just really breaking their neck to get ahead. And there's all that sort of Wall Street aspect of it that I don't connect with. And so for me, the connecting piece is like learning about the organization. CSAC for me was an opportunity to learn more about UC Berkeley and where I work and how I work in the Division of Student Affairs. And so the connecting and figuring out who does what, and having a really good network at work that I'm connected to humans, that to me is what it's about. That to me is what the...
So James, you used a really important word to me, I think, is authentic. You described building your network. And so when you talk about like who should be in your network, you said kind of the old model of collect as many business cards as you can, but how do you actually make your network authentic?
I think you can make really authentic connections with people that you have in a work sense, that you serve on various, either in your work function or on committee, and you actually just take the time to get to know them a little bit better and ask them about themselves. And it could be over lunch, that could be asking them out for a drink, that could just be listening to what they're saying and listening to the things they're telling you about themselves, outside of work. There's definitely a component of breaking bread that reaches people on a different level. And those authentic connections, I think you can't be authentic without, that's tautological, it's the reason it is because it's the reason it is, but you can't be authentic without actually being authentic. I mean, you actually have to really want to know other people. You actually really want to have to know about where you're working. Like if you don't, if the only reason I'm having lunch with Kara is because I want a job that she's listed, it just, you're gonna know. I think first of all, and I'm not going to get the job, and so it just seems like a grand waste of time. So I think if you have the intellectual curiosity about where you work, and that's the reason to do it. You actually want to know about these other pieces, and you want to know about the other humans, the organization around you. And what I've found by being authentic, and one of the things I've done always, like with CSAC, when I joined CSAC, there were 15 other people I've never met in my life, or 14 other people I never met. So it seemed, well, I'll just have lunch with all of them. I mean, it'll take months. But you have 14 lunches, and so I got to know all my people. That's how I got to know Inette. That's how I got to know Kara, who's here, and a lot of other people. It's just like, well, I have to work for these people for 3 years on this one assignment, so let's get to know them a little bit.
So this question of who should be in your network, I get every single day requests from LinkedIn, for instance, people who ask me to, join their network. Do we have to do that with everybody, whether we know them or not? I mean, there's a lot of people I have never heard of in my life, and they want me to join their network.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about like the virtual network in a little bit, and but I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I mean, I've connected to a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I too get these requests from people who are I really don't know them from Adam, but I did get a curious note from someone who said to me, I think I looked at his profile because it was like someone who knew someone who knew someone, and he had some sort of weird descriptor in his name, like champion of the network and all this sort of thing. So I was like, well, that's a really interesting way of like characterizing his role. And he sent me a note back saying, I'd like to connect with you, but instead of just saying, James, I want to connect with you, he said something very creepy, like, I am an open networker, and I want to be part of your network. I'm like, ooh, that feels kind of sleazy. I mean, it's kind of stalkerish, you know? So I don't think you have to. I mean, but there are people out there who, like recruiters, are very much into that. I learned when I talked to Bruce Meadows and a couple other people at your Now event. People in HR who are recruiters want everyone to be in their network. Because when they push out a job, like they get paid, well, not here, but real recruiters in the real world get paid to place people. So more of us, so he said, like, add me to your network. And so there could be a role in which you'd want to have your network that way. For me, I choose, like, there's a whole saying of, not handing out your business card and not having like the most friends at the party. You don't. The reason to build a network isn't because you want favors, right? The reason to make those connections isn't because you want something from the people. But after a time, when you have those networks, when you have that connection, you have that support system, and then you need something. You have built that network. That network is already there. So you're starting out. You're reaching out to, and these networks we're talking work-based, but this could be your church. This could be your family. This could be your community of practice at home. This could be like an identity group that you belong to. But if it's in a work format, you could actually build the people and build the network that you actually want to have part of your connections. And so maybe you decide that when you're building a network, you want to be in IT. So maybe you're somewhere else in an organization. I started out in student affairs on the academic side of the house. As I got more and more interested in IT projects, I started building my network through IT. One of the ways I did that is through the establishment of a community of practice, and that's BPOG. And then, by being part of that, that's how I specifically chose what area I want to explore. And so I think you can sit down and think well, what do I want to learn about this? Like if I'm in student affairs, or student services rather, is my network only people who are in student services? And that's fine. I actually don't think that's fine, because I think that just puts you in one community. I mean, the sweet spot of connecting, and you hear about this in Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, is the Venn diagram, right? Like if you have in your network not only people in student services, but people in IT and people in HR and people in shared services, and you can find where these things cross, that's where you actually become a really effective employee that way. Because if you know all those different types of people, you can pick up the phone and solve anyone's problem in your business. And that's regardless of the business that you're in. So if you're an academic advisor and you have all this access, you can figure out something from a facilities point of view that an academic advisor wouldn't do. So I think you can be very strategic about who are the people you want to reach out to. And I think it's case by case basis when people reach out to you to, how you want to sort of construct the people you hang around with.
Well, and then with that Venn diagram, you also can connect people to other people. There might be an opportunity for collaboration or synergy in their work or something.
Yeah, I mean that's really the sweet spot. If you have an expertise and you're like, oh, I was just having a conversation with Catherine the other day, and she's working on the same project. Maybe have you ever met her?
Right.
Do you, how do you connect those people and those resources? And so I think one of the it gets you to the point of there's a old tip around the fact that you should always leave a conversation with a colleague, especially a new colleague, with, is there anything I can do to help? You should always offer your help. Usually they'll say nothing, but it could be a very small thing. You could have been talking about a book. I follow up with that conversation. Is there anything I can do to help? Can I send you a link to what we talked about? Can I send you this? So you don't come to that meeting. We all heard stories, hopefully we're not dying ourselves, but we've all heard stories of people calling you out of the blue saying, I really need a job. I'm sorry, who is this? I have no idea who your name is. It's just, you're not going to really be able to help anyone who's literally a complete stranger to you. But there's ways if you build those conversations and those relationships, then they can help you actually.
So what are some of the networking protocols that you follow?
Those are very individual, I think, about how you interact with people. I think people have a lot of rules around hierarchy and title and location, and you see this played out, like to some greater, more amusing extent, on Scandal and House of Cards and shows like that, throwing people in front of buses. I'm much more like, if I'm reaching out to someone and I want to establish a relationship, for me it's on their terms. So I find a date that works for them, I find a time that works for them, I go to them. I have a bicycle, I have a scooter, so I can get around campus pretty easily. But for me, it's sort of, if I'm asking you to spend some time with me to build a relationship, or if I want some, maybe I want some advice. So I might have a connection through Inette saying, someone in development, I want to learn a little bit more about the development office, and I just would assume, like, I go down the line of, it's going to be at your terms, at your place. If we're having lunch, wherever you want to eat, I'm food agnostic, everything but eggplant. So, that's definitely one of the things I think about is making it as easy as possible for them, giving them background. I'm in the mentorship program, the BSA mentorship program, and so I've been interviewing a lot of potential mentees over the last month, and it's interesting to see how people approach you, because I was in that program as a mentee 10 years ago, and so seeing people, who are well prepared, research, stalk. I think that if you're meeting with someone, look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Facebook, look them up on Google. If they've written anything, read it. I mean, you're not going to read a huge book. You don't have to be like Jon Stewart and read a book every night before you interview someone. But that's part of the protocols. And I think like even the interview piece is part of the protocol. Like if I'm actually, I think it depends on the reason why you're reaching out to someone. But if I'm reaching out to someone because I actually want to know about their organization, then I have a stock set of questions. I have my org charts with me at all times. I look at where they are in the organization, and so I can be as conversant as I can, just to show them two things. One, if I'm going to spend the time, it's also my time, right? I have a finite amount of time. I want to make sure it's used the most efficiently I can. But also, it shows a great deal of respect for them. So I am going to them. I am asking them for information. But I've done my homework. I've done my research. I've thought about what I've said. I had a conversation with a mentee once who walked into my office, and I said, so, I have to ask, there's 180 people on this list you can interview as potential mentors, why me? And he said, I really like your name. and I thought, oh my God, here's like a half an hour of my life that's gonna go away, because like he had no other intention of like, he really didn't like my name. And I went home, my husband said, well, which part of your name? Like the middle name? I was so flummoxed by the answer, I couldn't really get back to him. But we had a nice conversation, but there was no intentionality of why he wanted to talk to me. So if you're gonna reach out to someone, have a reason. Like, you would think that would be pretty straightforward, but some people actually do go into conversations and there's just not a point. I don't mean having a hidden agenda or actually having a solid agenda or even like a public, bringing an agenda. That's intimidating over lunch. But and being very transparent, saying I'd like to meet and this is what I'd like to talk about. I'm interested in learning about the field of development. I actually did this 6 or 7 years ago. I was exploring development as a possible field. I said, I don't know anything about development. Who do I know through CSAC? Through my network, who can, they referred me to 3 people. I reached out to them and said, this is what I'm doing. I'd just love to have coffee. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee. I'd love to ask you questions. And people always say yes. People, usually make time for that.
So you mentioned earlier about breaking bread with people and,
yes.
and this idea of not, wasting your time. Time is a valuable commodity here, and we're all very busy people. So I happen to know that, one of the things that you practice is lunches with people.
Yes.
It's you have to eat, right?
Right.
So can you talk about that and your strategy around that?
Yeah, I think I've been here at Berkeley for 26 years, and I think in the first 10 years I worked in academic departments, and I really only kind of hung out with the people I worked with. And usually there were small departments, so it would be like the 4 of us, and we would work together all day, and we would have lunch together every day, and sometimes we would have a drink after work. And so I got to know them very, very well, like really well. That's too well, actually, because because you're going out at night, and you're going playing, and it just became, it's just 8 hours a day is enough. Adding lunch to that makes it 9, and adding a drink to that. So I had very, very close relationships. But and I thought I was doing bang up job as an employee and being really good when I was an academic advisor, serving my students. But I don't think I was. I think I was well intentioned, and I think I did help them. I don't think I stopped anyone from graduating or anything like that. But because my network was so small and incestuous, I don't there was so much I didn't know. Like the things I know now, I just didn't know then, and it's not because of age or wisdom or my Yoda-like appearance, apparently. It was more like I just have a more diverse amount of knowledge to call upon. So I think being part of that campus committee when I joined the Chancellor's Staff Advisory Committee and learning like, oh my God, there are all these, I never knew that there were all these other divisions. I just never thought about it. I had no idea who my vice chancellor was. I certainly didn't know the provost, and they actually sent me. I'll never forget it. In my first week, in my orientation, they gave me org charts, and so since then, I have not been without my org charts for 10 years. These are not the ones from last time. Though it would have been great if they were 10 years ago to see who survived. But actually going through, and I thought, well, as I got to know more people in different parts of the organization, I'm like, what a fascinating place I work in. Why haven't I been working here for years? I knew this one little building that I worked in. And so then this really got me engaged in spending time with other people. And I started making a rule, I think about 10 years ago, of primarily either eating with people who I work with, but also making sure that I'm having lunch with people I don't work with. Because I think another symptom of those earlier days was we would have a traumatic morning at the office, and then we would all go out to lunch and process it and who we were fighting with, and then the fighting would happen over the afternoon, and then the next morning would be the same. It's really nice to get out of your crazy, right? It's really nice to get into someone else's crazy. So I think that having lunch with someone like leaving IT and having lunch with someone from physical plant, it's just you just hear about a whole different world, and your conversations are really around. Well, what is your day like? You just asked that question. We all have banner days and other days where what's the thing that keeps you up at night? It's fascinating to learn what's a crisis in HR? It's completely different than a crisis in IT. And I don't live that, so I don't know that, so it's just really educational to do that. And people talk much more freely, I figure, when you're eating lunch.
So I think you and I subscribe to the same philosophy of never eat alone. Yes. And so, to have lunches, every day, I try to have lunches with somebody different that I'm reconnecting with, that I haven't seen in a long time, that I'm catching up with, that we're just having some reciprocal conversation about something that I can offer them, and what they're up to these days, that kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be an expensive proposition, right, about you have to have a budget and go, out to eat every single day, but you could be a brown bag and you just sit on campus in a nice, pretty spot. And just sit together, but this idea that you don't eat alone.
Yeah, I think, and also, and this is why I so sort of cringe at the term networking, because it sounds so formal and so scheming. When you build a really diverse group of people that you know at work, and you build friendships, it's just a lot more fun. Work is just a lot more fun. You build those informal connections. You make jokes. You can. Have exchanges of information with other people, and it's just you learn about opportunities in the organization. You can help mentor other people and connect them to those opportunities. I think pretty much every role I've had since I started building my connections on campus and developing myself that way has been through my network. Now, again, I said that earlier thing of you don't want to be a schemer, you don't want to be but it's been through the authentic building of my network. One of the things about making those connections and establishing yourself in ways is that people get to see you. So again, in my earlier career, I'm sure I did really good work. I was very well reviewed, right? But no one knew I existed, right? That's fine. I was just James Dudek in the English department in Wheeler Hall. The staff that I had lunch with every single day knew I existed. So, and the students who would graduate and then be replaced by other students. So, by me, I now consider myself a citizen of the university. So, so now that I have a level of visibility through other activities, I'm asked to serve on functions, I'm asked to serve on committees. So this is a generational joke, so I apologize. It reminds me, I serve, I'm like UC Berkeley's version of Nipsey Russell. I'm sort of famous for being famous, right? He was this old comedian that no one really knew what he was famous for, although somewhere here.
The Kardashians.
The Kardashians, right,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they haven't really done anything. So, but once you have the level of visibility, people actually ask you to participate in things. And then, of course, you have to do good work. I mean, you can be seen everywhere, and we talked about this phenomenon of bad networking, which is like, you can be seen everywhere, and you get job offers, or people are interested in having you be on interview panels, and that's great. You could also be seen everywhere and have a horrible attitude, and be known as that person who shows up to every meeting with a horrible attitude, and we all know a couple of them. So, networking can be not only just a good thing. I didn't put you on, Tom. Networking can also be a good thing, but also, people are watching you, so that level of visibility is good. But if you're visible, you have to be aware that people are watching. Right?
Yeah, so you talked about, that it makes it more fun to work here. For me, it makes it more rewarding to work here. And I really think having the network that I've established over so many years is part of the reason I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's been incredibly valuable to me.
Well, it's, luckily we don't have to choose. It adds value, but it actually makes those connections really, it makes it fun to come to work. And one of the other protocols I wanted to mention was the importance of gardening. It sounds so pretty when you say it that way about networking. Is if you build connections and you build a network and you have this posse of people you run around campus with, again, we have a limited amount of time, right? And we have a limited amount of lunches. And how do you actually, let's say you have a great conversation with someone, she's not in your work group, you're not on a committee with her, you may never see her again. Like, how do you follow up on that? And there are a number of tricks you can use. I try to keep loose track with some people. There are like some faculty I want to be involved with because I don't work directly with faculty anymore. So there's a couple of faculty who are involved in IT projects. And I literally, on my calendar quarterly, it says, schedule lunch with Bob. And that's just a way to remind myself that I should be having a conversation with Bob. Bob should be hearing from me. We've had a pass before. A natural, organic way of doing this, and this is why Facebook is wonderful in some regards, is birthdays. Birthdays, it's not December 25th, so birthdays are different days every year. And there's an opportunity to reach out to a colleague, to wish them happy birthday. My birthday is on Facebook, and I have a lot of friends who I work with who are my friends on Facebook and see that. It's if you call, it sounds like very trite, like, oh yeah, everyone does that. I don't know about you, but how many coworkers called you on your birthday? Like, no one did this year. So I'm not. That's not a cry for help. But it's just, you think it's like, oh yeah, it's basic. Everyone does that. And when was the last time you got a birthday card from a colleague who doesn't work in your work group? Yeah, I don't think I've ever gotten one. So it really is impactful to do something like that, and it gives you an opportunity to say, "It's your birthday, happy birthday." We haven't talked in God knows how long, and so that's a way of reconnecting. But and the reason I call it gardening is like if you don't follow up on this your network, it's just the only information they'll have about you is from God knows when the last time you talked. So it's it shouldn't be 5 years away. You should be. If you're trying to keep that up with thousands of people, I was recently reading this book of someone who does that. That's a little maniacal, but what are the people you want to concentrate on, and what are the skills and abilities you want to learn and grow, and who are the people you frankly want to know, and the businesses you want to know, and how you loop in with them over a year.
So I like your metaphor about gardening. So I would think of it as planting seeds and then tending to them over time and reaping, the benefits of it.
And we can run with that analogy and talk about root rot and things like that.
Not TMI.
But that brings me back to the whole question that you mentioned a couple times about how some people have a perception of networking as sleazy or as fake. So what would you say to people that feel that it's like that?
Well, I think it can be like that. And I think, especially if it's not done well. Again, if you get a box of 500 business cards and you go to your conference and your sole aim is to exhaust that box, that's I don't think it's probably not sleazy, but it's kind of, you can't really have substantive conversations with 500 people in 3 days. You just can't. So, I think there's a reason for that. Perception. I think that some of us have that because we've been approached by people who are so transparently fake or so transparently just want to get something out of you. I was talking to a colleague who had
Users.
I had talked to a colleague who had met a famous politician and who had worked with her for years, and I said, "Oh, what was she like in person?" He said, "Oh, she was one of those people, when you were talking to her, she was always looking behind you to see if there was someone more important coming into the door." So it's like the opposite of that. I mean, there are people who will talk to you at campus events, who will talk to you, and as soon as the assistant vice chancellor walks in the door, they're like, "Gotta go," and then we'll make a beeline. Well, how does that make me feel? You know, I mean, that's someone I was actually only they were only spending my time because I was of value to them for that moment. And so, you know, what is that? Don't be a jerk. You know, it's just that, you know, that's the networking piece. And I think if you can do this and actually be a human. You can I actually enjoy the people I spend my time with. We'll go to Eureka, and some of us will talk to each other, and I'll actually enjoy that experience. But I'm not going to try to talk to everyone in this room, because that's going to be ridiculous. And you know, what kind of conversation can we have, and how authentic and how real will that be, right? So there's ways of doing this in a very non-fake, non-sleazy manner.
So do you have to be an extrovert to be a networker?
So this is something that I've thought about a lot, because you don't. You just have to be interested in building a network and building connections with people. So extroverts and introverts, there's a lot of stuff that's been written about that. And extroverts get their power from people. So extroverts, natural extroverts, likes to be on stage, likes to have as many parties to go to as possible. And introverts are exhausted by people. I'm actually a closeted introvert. So I was a very, very shy person growing up. I only learned how to talk to people when I was in my late teens and early 20s. So doing stuff like this is kind of anxiety fraught. Like meeting lots of people is not my level of comfort. But I do enjoy building and having the authentic connections with people and learning more about the organization and being more effective at my work and being able to help people and put people together. Mm-hmm. Like that outweighs the other side. Okay. But like after this, I will marshal through the bar, so that's easier, right? You promised me there'd be drinks. So, I'll go home and I'll be exhausted. So, I'll just need my alone time. So I'm going on vacation next week, and it's just going to be me and my husband on a beach with no one else around for a week. And some people would think that would drive me crazy because there's perception of me that I want people around me all the time, and it is not. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. So, but the perception is, in order to do this, you can't be a shy person. I'm inwardly shy. You have to be really super aggressive. So you just have to be interested in learning more about your organization and about yourself, and and have your own learning goals, right? That's kind of what's driving this.
Well, and even in a public setting, like going to the happy hour after this session, networking is still a one-to-one connection. You only have to talk to one person at a time, right? So if you're an introvert, that is more comfortable to think about just one-on-one, than that you're there and you have to now talk to 50 people.
Yeah. No, and I think that, and maybe that's why I feel like you should lie down on the couch now. I'm just realizing, that's why lunch is my venue of choice, because it is one-on-one and it is less threatening and it is less risky and you can be more vulnerable. But there was an experience I had a couple months ago where there were 3 big work events, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that I was in, 3 work events that I was involved in presenting at. And the 4th day there was a reception where we were supposed to meet a whole bunch of people. My work group was supposed to meet a whole bunch of people. And I remember walking into the room on the 4th day of this reception, there were 100 people I didn't know in a completely different field of the university. I really didn't know anyone. I walked into the room and I literally turned around and said, I'm not doing that. It's just like I had done too much. And so then I sat myself down and said, well, okay, wait. I'll get fired, so I had to go back in that room. It was interesting. I'm like, okay, I did not. I did too many events. I think one time you said, I'm not going to do more than a couple of events in a day. It's exhausting, and just being aware of that. So just being smarter about what you do and what you engage in, I think is the key. And for me, making it more manageable, as you observed, is like having those smaller conversations.
Well, and I'm an extrovert, and even so, when I'm at events, I still prefer talking to one person at a time because there's more quality to me in those conversations. But you and I share a strategy around that when you go to a party or a big networking event or big campus meeting or something like that.
Yeah, and this is something that Inette taught me, and that is go to a party either personally or professionally, and be there exactly on time. Because no one else does that because it's lame. Well, fine, be lame. It is lame. But especially if you go to a personal party, like a friend's birthday party or something like that, if you're the first one there, you're the only one who's going to actually have the time to talk to the host. And you can help her set up. You can actually have a conversation, big hug, and all that sort of stuff. And that's great. And then the 20 other people arrive, and you'll never see her again. Right? Then you talk to all these other people. Also, you didn't tell me this, but I learned this on my own. The food is the freshest is going to be the beer is going to be. This is the proviso and this is the strategy. Maybe you don't like the people. So maybe you have to go to a work event of someone, this is real, of someone who is moving on to some other adventure and you have to go politically to represent. Maybe you don't want to be the first one there in the room because you don't want to have an extended conversation, and that's fine too, but you can time it either way of, if you really do like the people and you do want to be there, you're the person who can go and say, congratulations and be there on time.
And then leave.
And then leave, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, share some of your strategies for actually building your network, how you build your network, both personally and in the virtual world of networking today.
I think I'm stronger on the personal and less so on the virtual. I haven't really reached out that much virtually, but in the personal, I've mentioned a couple things already, like being involved in campus work, being a citizen of the university, joining groups like this, joining organizations like the Berkeley Staff Assembly or BPOG. Starting a group like this is very powerful. I learned a lot from starting BPOG, and that's basically how I learned to know all the people in IT. That was very powerful. Go to parties we talked about. Let's see, I think I wrote some notes on giving presentations. Volunteering your service is a great way, again, to colleagues, not only in your department, but I've always been interested in, I'm very interested in seeing how people appear in the interview process. I've always found that fascinating. So in any iteration I've been in, when people mention they're looking for X, Y, and Z, or they're hiring someone, I'm like, do you need an external person to be on your hiring committee? I'd love to be on your hiring committee. That's a way of meeting a new employee or employee who's transferring over. It's also reading job descriptions. How often do we get to see each other's job descriptions? Like never, right? Now a little bit with LinkedIn. But those are some of the ways you can dig into the work. And if you volunteer, there's so much volunteer work you can do. It's sort of maddening when people say, that no one will develop me at work, or there's no opportunity for me at work. You can go up to anyone in this room and say, hey, can you use 5 hours of me a week? You can go to anyone in this room and to a person, I think you would say, sure. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, you can pitch in, and that's a way of building really strong connections too.
Okay.
And the virtual piece, I've been involved with LinkedIn. I've written some things for LinkedIn. I've posted articles on LinkedIn. Those are some things I've shared with networks, or someone, a lunch date who I've just seen or about to see. Like if I find an article or a book or a reference, I'd forward that along. Mm-hmm. But I haven't been like an open networker guy that I denied. I haven't really built this virtual network specifically.
So some of that.
Have you?
Well, some of that I've done is joining groups like on LinkedIn, for instance, that are relevant to what I do and what I'm interested in, and then participating in discussions. There was a fascinating discussion just last week that went out from an HR group that was about the whole move towards more contingent workforce. So hiring more people on contracts and consultants and that kind of thing. And people, so a big HR mucky muck person out in the world wanted to ask the question, what are organizations' experiences with that, and what's the upside, what's the downside? And it was and I participated in the discussion. It was a very vigorous discussion that had a lot more posts than most anything else that I've seen. And then as soon as I participated in that discussion, the person who started it asked me to join her network. And so now I have a connection with her, and and I wouldn't have had that otherwise. So I'm just starting to dabble in it as well to get out there, because I'm a little leery about the whole notion of an influencer score. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but with social networking now, this is a thing. Like, you're supposed to have a high influencer score, and that's based partly in just pure numbers. How many people are in your network? And I think it's a little shallow, to just build numbers for the sake of having huge numbers. So I'm playing around with it as well to explore this notion of building a social network through virtual channels. But I'd love to hear from any of you with your experiences of doing that. How have any of you tried to expand your virtual network or your social media connections? Wilmer?
I guess one thing that works for me in LinkedIn is endorsing skills of others. I see that they always reciprocate back and endorse you with some of the skills that they know you have. And that's always just kind of put you on somebody's stream of things that just happened, so that you're more visible online. So.
Great, thank you. Somebody else? Yes, Kim?
Yeah, I think groups are really good. I'm in a couple of communication Facebook groups, and there's like a college health social media one. And before a conference, I actually reached out and said, can we have a virtual meet, or can we have a meetup? Mm-hmm. So we all got together, and then we all got together in person at the conference, and that was really good.
Oh, nice.
So I would say, for all of us, probably no matter what your field is, in all the other colleges all over the world, they probably have the same field, and all those people are such a great network. And so that's a really easy way virtually to connect.
Great tip, thanks. Jonathan?
Well, just, for me initially, it's especially in LinkedIn, which like they try and force you to just approve everybody that I've never heard of. But I look at it as a 6 degrees of separation sort of thing. If it's a friend of a friend, and maybe they've popped up and there's some connection, some other interest, even outside of work, well, maybe I'll follow up with that person. But usually it's already known people first, and then build out from there. Partly to keep it true, and partly to that it is more of an extension of the my personal actual physical network, not beyond that. But how it builds is other people tagging in based on that, and often it's through extracurriculars, BSA or the mentorship program, campus committees. I'm part of Latin Cal. It's one of the other campus staff organizations. There's a lot of really good places to connect with people, and even before it was LinkedIn, it was just emails and so forth. But just a way to extend what I already have person to person.
Well, when you do that 6 degrees of separation idea that you're talking about, it also expands the diversity of your network, which is a really important concept in building a learning network in particular.
Yeah, I love the fact that you pull that in, because that's and you think, if only it were written on the wall, I would remember to say that. But the more diverse your network, and however you define that, like the better and more successful it is for you and for your work, and for them too. Because if you if, again, going back to that thing, if you only had student services people and you're a student services person in your network, that would be one. Or if you were only hanging out with people who looked like you and sounded like you, that would be a different lack of diversity. The most diverse networks, and when you have a connector, like, I think between the two of us, we know everyone on campus, probably. So when you bring someone like that, when you bring that experience and that background to another colleague, they benefit from that diversity of your network too, because you're going to say to them, oh my God, I know all these different people in these different organizations, and that's really helpful. That's really helpful.
So how do you know what to talk about with people when you're meeting them? Or like when we go to Eureka, like, how do you know what to talk about?
Well, you're going to blow my questions for like later. Now I'm going to come up with a new set. So this is why I don't do these things. It's very stressful. So here's the next question. There's a really successful trick that you're actually seeing in real life now, but it's like you can just interview people. We love to talk about ourselves. Nothing was more fascinating than me. So, you can go out and say, so how actually did you come to Cal? And I'll just be off and running. And it's a great introvert trick, by the way. If I'm with someone and I'm not really feeling the energy of like really diving into a deep conversation, you can just say, so how did you get the cow? What did you actually do? And then you just ask lots of questions, right? And I think I said this to you once that, you know, especially if you're doing that eating lunch and you know you have won the interview game if you're finished with your food and she hasn't even started hers because you've gotten her talking for 45 minutes. So, you know, that's one thing, just to ask them about themselves. But you could have a question set that you think about beforehand of, you know, why you're sitting down with them at all. If it's because it's their birthday and you're following up and it's been a year, your first question, so, God, we haven't seen each other in a year. You know, how's that been? How was 2014? You know, what was the, you can ask them, what was your top thing this year, if it's really been that long. So I think there are different, you know, if you don't have a specific question set, you can always talk to people about travel. People love talking about travel, even if they can't go anywhere, they still love talking about travel. You can always talk about food, especially in this area, everyone's a foodie or pretends to be a foodie. So there are lots of just like naturally accessible conversations. People with kids, I don't have kids, but people love to talk about their kids and grandchildren, so those are really easy topics to get into.
Well, and I'll make a plug for what this community of practice is about, social learning. You know, a question you could always ask somebody is, you know, what's something you've learned about recently that really interested you? It's a great plug, you know, it helps you learn something that you might want to go explore yourself.
Or what have you read?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah,
what's
something you've read or something you've seen or
Right.
a video that you've seen recently or
Yeah.
something. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what about some of you? Any ideas for questions that you would ask somebody when you're meeting them at a networking event?
We're going to capture them so we can use them when we go to our networking event. How
Yeah,
does that sound?
Yeah, so let's share our best thinking about helping people out when we go to Eureka. What are some questions that you can ask each other?
Well, it's always like current events, right? Whatever's happening. I mean, obviously with the protests, that would be something like, you know, so any kind of current event is always something that people talk about or want to talk about and get their opinions about it.
Okay.
I always think about the weather. I mean, that is so funny. You're in an elevator and like, usually people don't talk in elevators, but they will talk about the weather. You know, it's just
Other ideas? Tom?
One thing I did with the IT Managers Forum is we would do table breakouts at the beginning of the session. So there'd be 4 or 6 people at a table, and we would say, everybody gets 1 minute, talk about something that you're, you know, some issue you're dealing with at work right now.
Great.
And that would generate connections between those people and then follow-ups later of like, hey, well, that's an interesting topic to work with.
Okay, great, thanks. Other ideas? Good?
What brought that person to the event? What was their motivation or what their main interest is
Okay.
in being here?
Yeah, great. Other ideas? Kim?
Well, these are no-fail for bigger groups, maybe not work groups, but a really good one for like a mixed audience are things like, what was your first concert? Even if people can't really remember, it's just something people can start talking about, or where are you in your lineup of siblings? Even if you're the only one, that's a good one. You know, if you won the lottery, what would you do? Like sometimes if you just want to have conversations that aren't necessarily work related, those are really, really great.
And I think there's a level at which you know, that's the right level of intimacy, especially with I mean, you don't want to, you want to have a personal connection, so like asking like what are you doing over the winter break, for example, is neutral, and there are like other things that are more like high risk, I would say. Like you wouldn't want to say to someone like, I don't know, when was the last time you cried?
Examples of what not to do.
But we have all been asked awkward questions at parties. I'm very certain about this, so.
But in a work vein, maybe you ask something like, what's the most valuable tip you would give to somebody about being successful here?
Right, or when was the last time you were fired?
Why are you looking at me when
No,
you say that?
no. You probably didn't check your email before this. You did call me Yoda. I'm still working on that.
So, yes.
Yeah, I just would add, just if you're talking to people from campus, you could ask, what brought you to UC Berkeley? How did you decide to come here? Or even, since I work in facilities, sort of like, what's your favorite place on campus? So you
Oh,
just begin to
nice.
warm up about working here specifically.
Great. Yes,
I think
please.
people like to talk, love to talk about their pets.
Okay, good topic. Mhm. Pets and children, right, yep. Mhm. Okay. So, thanks for capturing those, Kathy. So we have just about 5 minutes left of our session before we go actually try this. Let's open it up for a Q&A. Any questions that you have for James or I?
Well,
Jonathan?
I had one because, like James, I'm an old timer here, 29 years on campus, variety of different jobs, within the same department, but different parts of it. And the shared services model that's come about has brought a lot of new people to campus, who, it seems like the philosophy is keep them chained to the phone, don't have a person to connect with, when you have an actual question about them. I'm obviously, paraphrasing what they might say about their operation, but the idea to me is that, I used to have the person to reach out to help sort out a particular problem or find out, how it's done now. And, that's that element of being able to reach out to an individual is lost. So it might be a workaround, or it might be actually trying to bring up some of these folks that will hang through that change to make some connections themselves. But I don't know if you've experienced that, but if you come up with other ways that you can reach out to some of those folks to say, maybe help connect them too.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It's one of the things that we talk about in communities of practice when those groups meet is how do you make a connection to 4th Street? How can you invite people up from 4th Street? I think working with the management group who are aware of the importance of having them interact and build their customer base on campus is a powerful thing. Incentivizing attendance by things like this, later in the afternoon or the first thing in the morning, I think is a strategy, and just making sure that people are invited. So one of the efforts I'm involved in is the One IT effort to build community across of all IT at Berkeley. And we make sure that we work with the leadership team and CSS IT to make sure that they can close down shop so all the people can participate in that. And we had really good participation. Another suggestion is if you're hosting an event, or you can think about hosting an event at 4th Street, because there are now like 500 people down at 4th Street. So it's a major opportunity to communicate to a chunk, even more so than on this campus. So I think there are people who work there now who are hired into it who really enjoy it. I was talking to a colleague, a mentee the other day, who said she loves it. It's like, this is 500 people, this is great. I have this whole community at work. I never had that before. I used to work in the academic department on campus. Didn't know anyone else except the 3 people in my office. Now I just have like 100 people on my floor. And so, there's actually a big community there too, but it doesn't lose the fact that they need to be connected.
I guess it's a suggestion too for that question. Like, I know we're working on, so I work with a logistic team, and we deal with a lot of people from CSS for procurement and things like that. And we've never met them, so we're actually scheduling like a video conference for them to get to know our team and get to see who we actually talk to like 4 days a week through a video conferencing. So they all have that capability, so it's something to take advantage of.
Well, another thing is, so many people who work down there came from outside. And so because they're so far away, they don't really even know the campus, they don't get to come to campus. So it's a nice thing to invite somebody that you actually are needing to do something with down there, not just to get to know their face, but invite them to have lunch at the faculty club or something that brings them to campus, take them so they get some opportunity to be part of this, feel more connected. Yes.
I guess I was wondering if that's sort of related to that, and that's that, like, the networking can happen at all job classifications and all levels. And I think you beautifully described that it doesn't have to be about you advancing your career by networking with so-and-so, that we build a much more resilient university if we understand what jobs are in all kinds of different classifications, and if we're making connections with people in all different classifications. So that there's that, and then another question was like, well, how do we build the appreciation of that from the administration? Because I really do think that networking makes us better employees in the long run. The community here on campus, wherever, but how do we help them understand this is an important thing to do?
Great question.
Yeah, I think a lot of them already get it, and a lot of them realize, because they are also part of a national community and networking across the nation and across the world, especially the vice chancellors and chancellors who travel, internationally for to build their network, and researchers get it, and academics get it. I think that just being transparent about how actually, I had a boss in that academic department a long time ago who's gone, who said, was really fond of saying no to requests to do anything outside of the office. So I could never join this, I could never join that, I could never go to any meetings. She's like, I need you here with the students. Well, I look back now, like, what a disservice that she didn't get the understanding that had I had the opportunity to meet more advisors, I would have been a much better advisor than I was. I just would have, but. So I think getting them to understand or to tell that story is I think most of them do understand the use of it. I think the balance is how much staff time is dedicated to events like this, and and getting the core mission done. So, but I think you can do both, and I think you get the core mission done better by, as you said, by building a robust network.
Well, and I think the more you give examples of how doing that has actually helped you in your job, made you a more effective employee, then I think they start to appreciate it.
I think that one final thing I meant to mention is it's a quirky thing I do, and it's more high risk, and it's very strange, but I invite you to try it because it always works. When I get an announcement of someone other than the chancellor joining Berkeley, so like maybe it's the director of X in student affairs, I'm on the mailing list, I email them and I say, Julie, welcome to Berkeley. This is who I am, here's my LinkedIn, this is what I do. I'd love to take you for a cup of coffee in your first week or second week. And then I meet her and I bring org charts and I say, this is who I am. And I did this first and it was kind of weird. And I realized it was kind of weird because she's like, who is this guy and why is he doing this? And so I just said, I want to be very clear. I don't have an agenda. I'm not trying to get you on my side. I don't want any money. I'm not asking you for a job and I don't want to hire you. I said, I'm really just saying, welcome to Cal, welcome to Berkeley. You're part of the community. Is there anything I can do to help you?
Really nice.
And people really, really appreciate it. And it is authentic. And they do call me up every once in a while, or I'll see them some other time, and we'll end up serving on some other effort again. But it's a really nice thing to do. And you know what? They really appreciate it because if you're new to the university, you have no friends. Right? And you don't want to have lunch with the vipers you're working with, right? Or you actually don't even know whether you trust them or not. You got that on tape, right? Not talking about my own workplace. But it's really nice to have someone reach out to you from the outside saying, I'm here to be an ally. I'm here to be a colleague. What can I do to help you? And it's always been appreciated.
Well, James, this has been really great. I appreciate so much all the great advice and wisdom you've shared, and I'm very happy and proud that you're part of my network.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being with us and learning so many great tips and tools and techniques. And now let's go off and practice them. So let's all head over to Eureka.